watching Reason and Theology Live. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael, on a Friday evening, joined here by Mike Lewis, who is the editor of Where Peter Is. Editor, and are you also the founder, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it was a team of four of us who founded the website, and it kind of turned out that I was the one who wound up doing everything. So,
Yeah.
I copy edit most of it. So, I'm founding managing editor, I guess you could say.
Awesome. We've had a few of your contributors on in the past before, but this is your first time here, so welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To this. Yeah.
Looking sorry about the delay, guys, listeners. My webcam wasn't working, and so I had to prop up my laptop, and anyway. We're situated now.
Don't worry.
I had my whole bookshelf thing worked out behind me, and now it's
the camera angle is different. Well, Don't worry about it. They're kind of used to me getting started late, just because I have a job outside of this, so some things kind of get thrown off, and so we don't always start on time, unfortunately. So I think everybody's used to that, for better or for worse. Well, what we're doing is discussing your article that you recently wrote. Maybe you could tell us the title of it, where to find it, but it's the one, of course, on Mel Gibson and Father Altman. What's the title of the article?
Well, the title of the article is Mel Gibson, the Man Without a Pope. And I mean, it's a play, I was trying to think of a pun or something. Yeah. He was in the movie, The Man Without a Face. So that was I was trying to spin off Braveheart or something like that. And that was the best that I could do. But I mean, one of the reasons why is because Mel Gibson, he was raised Sedevacantist, which is, for those who don't know, it's basically Catholics who believe there hasn't been a valid pope since 1958 with the death of Pius XII. And so they believe that all the popes from John the 23rd onward were anti-popes. And of course, Vatican II, which, started in 1962, ran to 1965, is an invalid council. And then they have theological reasons for why the new rites of the liturgy, like ordination and the Mass, basically the new versions of those, or the new revisions of those, they consider invalid sacraments. So anyway, and Mel Gibson has interestingly played, has found himself associating with some priests who are, theoretically at least technically in communion. I guess you wouldn't say that Father Altman is in good standing any longer, but Father Dave Nix, Father James Altman of La Crosse, and then Bishop Rene Gracida of Corpus Christi, Texas. He's been seen interacting with them. They've posted pictures on the internet and that kind of thing. And then this past Friday, they had a rally for the canceled priests organization that Father Altman is involved with, and he spoke at. And then as a special treat to the audience, they had a pre-recorded video from none other than Mel Gibson. And he kind of spoke about how he wanted to support the priests and how, basically tore apart Vatican II and said, we should throw the whole thing out the window. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but, talked about how it was like a whole new church and there was nothing wrong before. And he agreed with Archbishop Vigano that we should roll back the entire thing. So,
well, there's a couple things that I want to ask about. First, somebody might say, look, I don't think that Mel Gibson is actually a sedevacantist. I think he's a sedeprivationist. Can you tell us what the difference is and why you think that he's a sedevacantist?
Well, so I think that the story that he's a sedeprivationist, is that how you pronounce it? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Is that he, there's a Taylor Marshall blog post from 2008. And in that story, he talks about a priest that he spoke to, And based on that conversation, he believes that Mel isn't a full sedevacantist, but he, but he seems to be a sedeprivationist. So basically, it's a speculation. Now, what a sedeprivationist means, effectively speaking, I mean, they wouldn't necessarily do anything differently than a sedevacantist would, because they believe that all the popes past a certain point are heretical. They believe that the council is heretical, and they deny the legitimacy of some of the new sacraments. But the difference is, and I guess this is a question that a lot of people who deny the papacy of the last 6 popes have to deal with. It's a question of, well, what are we looking at in the future here? Obviously all the bishops and cardinals that were around when Pius XII was pope are now deceased. And so really, there's no apostolic continuity, and there's no, in other words, there would be no valid way to get a pope. So a sedi-privationist, if I pronounce it correctly, basically what they believe is that the offices are still active in a sense, I guess, but basically what it is because they believe John the 23rd is a heretic, because they believe John Paul II is a heretic, they don't have the authority of a pope. But were Pope Francis or his successor or the next pope down the line to have a conversion and reject Vatican II, then they would become the legitimate pope with all the power and all the authority that a pope has. Whereas a true sedevacantist, I guess, just they think it's going to the end of the world, or basically they disagree with that theory of that there's any legitimacy at all.
There was a tweet by Father Nix where he says Bishop Gracita believed the only living pope is Pope Benedict XVI. Mel Gibson has historically followed his own biological father's belief that all post-Vatican II popes are heretical and therefore not valid popes. This was posted on June 23rd of 2020. That sounds like sedevacantism to me.
Yeah, and he is, and I think I sent you another tweet where he actually explicitly says sedevacantism. Now there's a picture, and we're kind of going out of order, but we know that Father Dave Nix, at some point, he and Father Altman went and visited Mel Gibson at his place in California. This was the June before that, so I don't know if they knew each other at this point or if he knew for sure. He's never taken back that statement that Mel is a sedevacantist. So yeah, I mean, so that's one example of some. So basically, the thing is, and I was surprised that this was the comment that I kept getting, on Facebook and Twitter, and even got a personal email I got, from people who are like, well, I heard that Mel Gibson really isn't a sedevacantist, and that he is this sedeprivationist. And I mean, the thing is, I Googled it myself, and probably the second or third hit is that Taylor Marshall article. And not a ton of people have actually kind of done the legwork, but based on history, for one thing, his father was an absolutely outspoken sedevacantist. Mel Gibson is well known to have funded sedevacantist churches working with his dad. He has a chapel in Agora Hills, California. They don't have a website. They're under, behind a locked gate. Like you have to pass muster to get into this compound to go worship at Mel Gibson's church. So they don't necessarily advertise that they exist even. And I was able to track down the name of the priest and found a couple of websites where the priest is listed as a sedevacantist. You've never heard, I guess the thing is, Mel Gibson has never denied being a sedevacantist, has never said, I remember there's the famous Diane Sawyer interview around the time that The Passion of the Christ came out, and she asked him about his father, and really was going into his father's Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. And Mel just said, don't go there. He doesn't talk about his dad like that. I think what's kind of going on, and I mean, to kind of make a parallel, I mean, you have to think Mel Gibson is a Hollywood superstar, right? I mean, now granted, the last 15 years or so, or maybe 20 years since the Passion of the Christ, because of his various outbursts and controversies and things like that, his career has gone up and down. But if you think like the career path that led him up to Braveheart, where he won Best Director, starred in, I mean, basically the top of Hollywood. You don't get that far by being totally open about your extremist views, especially if they're I mean, just imagine a set of a contest where, so Mel is a businessman on top of being an actor and a director and, a religious adherent and, and so my thinking is that he's been purposely vague about it, partly for, marketing reasons and partly, I think, in a way, sort of evangelism. If that makes any sense to you, like to try to help bring people along, like his speaking at that event, he didn't say become a set of a contest, but he said like, these bishops are bad. Vatican II is bad. I'm on your side. I'm with you. I'm going to help you out. I think you guys have a good point. Like that's a way to sort of build that friendship, I think. And then maybe once you've earned someone's trust, which, maybe he has with Father Altman and Father Nix, then he can kind of talk about what he really thinks.
You mentioned earlier Father Altman, and you said that you don't think he's in good standing. Why would you say that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a canon lawyer, so I don't even know the whole. He's still a priest, but I believe he is under some kind. He doesn't have, his bishop has taken away his faculties. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe someone's explained it a little bit more closely to you, but I know he can't celebrate valid mass, or I mean, he can't celebrate public mass. He can celebrate private mass. I guess
some are going to say that's because he's being persecuted.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is there are a lot of priests out there who have been treated unjustly. In a sense, anyone who's been ordained a priest is a priest forever, even if you've been defrocked, even if you've been laicized, even if, canon law says that, I mean, you look at Theodore McCarrick and, he's just Ted now. He's not a cardinal. Like that can be taken away, but he's still sacramentally speaking, ontologically speaking, is still a bishop. And so, but I mean, with Father Altman, he's still in the canonical process. Like he's appealed his removal as pastor. The fact that he's traveling outside of his diocese, the fact that he's speaking publicly, the fact that he's denigrating his bishop and the Pope and other bishops. My guess is that he, further sanctions might be coming down the road. I guess maybe I shouldn't have said in good standing because I don't know the canonical term, but he's not, and he is allowed to, I think, present himself as a priest. Like that's one of the things that gets taken away when you're suspended, I believe. So it's sort of, I don't know. I mean, you talk to people every day. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have used that term, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what you're saying is you're concerned, I guess, about his behavior, perhaps. I mean, for example, I heard him not long ago, actually, on a video where the context is clear. I don't know who else he could be referring to other than his bishop. It seemed that he called him a little Nazi, a little Hitler.
Oh, wow.
Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's to get back to your point, when priests, so he's a secular priest, which is different than a religious priest. And those terms, we think of like order priests, they're called religious priests. And then secular priests are just diocesan priests. They don't belong to a religious order. And secular priests or diocesan priests make two vows. They take one vow of celibacy and they take another vow or make another promise It's not a vow. They make a promise of celibacy and a promise of obedience to their bishop and to his successors. So obviously there are canonical processes and people can appeal. And obviously there are bad bishops out there who treat people wrongly, who treat priests wrongly, shut down parishes. I mean, you hear all the stories where they, wind up using the collection money to, settle some scandal or some lawsuit. But in terms of obedience, Father Altman made a promise that he would listen to his bishop. And I know back in before the election, I guess around October, when he was getting really vocal, his bishop, William Kavanaugh, put out a public statement and said, obviously he's been getting too political. That's not really the role of a priest. I'm going to be speaking with him in private, and then future action might need to be taken. Father Altman didn't slow down. He kept going. And then in, I think, early July, finally, the letter came out, removing him officially from the parish. And then because he's a pastor, he has the right to appeal to the Vatican. And that's about a year-long process. He collected about $750,000 or something like that for his canonical defense fund. But he's continued to speak out and I mean, really, actually, I mean, the funny thing is, I think Bishop Callahan has a reputation for being one of the more conservative bishops, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why he lasted that long, why Altman lasted that long. But yeah, so basically that's kind of what's going on. But like people point to like Padre Pio. He was suppressed by his bishop completely fairly, and he was obedient, he was silent, and eventually he was vindicated. So that's, that's one of the first signs when, rather than showing humility and accepting even an unjust decision to rebel the way that he has. And the funny thing is, he's still got an appeal process. It's like if he was on his best behavior while this was going on and saying the right things, he'd still have a chance, but he seems to be not interested in that.
Well, how does he tie into Mel Gibson? You mentioned Father Altman and also Father Nix in this article. What do they have to do with Mel Gibson?
Well, and that's kind of the crazy thing, because presumably they are priests of the Catholic Church. They both still answer to bishops. But for a sedevacantist, because they believed that the rite of ordination that came out after Vatican II, late, I think in 68 was when it was promulgated, and then it was implemented through the 70s. Why would, the question is, why would Mel be interested in them? Because the bishops who ordained them as priests were ordained priests themselves following, in the new rite. So as far as he's concerned, they're a layman, and they're following an anti-pope. But that's where it kind of gets interesting. Like, why would he be interested? Now there have been rumblings, I guess, that, and I don't have the facts at hand, but it seems, because it wasn't just Nix and Altman, they said several other priests went down to Mel's place for a supercharged retreat. And I don't know what, 6 Vatican II Novus Ordo priests are doing, having a supercharged retreat at a sedevacantist church. Like that doesn't seem to add up. And that's why I sort of said, that's why it seems to me that Mel Gibson might be courting them. Obviously the sedevacantist movement is very small. These are priests who are very disgruntled with the Vatican II Church. I think Father Nix is pretty close, if he hasn't outright admitted that he thinks that Benedict is still the true pope. Father Altman has gotten much more vocal in his language about Pope Francis. Like, I think during his talk in Chicago, he called him Jorge Bergoglio the whole time. And it seems like Mel Gibson might see an opportunity there to maybe recruit some, I mean, to use a Taylor Marshall term, to infiltrate the Vatican II church, except in, almost in reverse, if that makes any sense. And I guess the funny thing is, so we also talked about Bishop Gracita, and Bishop Gracita is he's the emeritus bishop of Corpus Christi, Texas. He's 98 years old, but I've seen him I think I saw him do an interview last year. He seemed pretty lucid. He seemed pretty he seemed to get what was going on. He didn't sound like a doddering, senile old man. And he openly on his blog denies that Francis is Pope, and has for several years. He's one of only 2 bishops in the, like in the Novus Ordo Church, or in the, that have openly deny that Francis is Pope. But then even more curiously, in February, because I was like, okay, here's Mel Gibson showing up with Gracita. A few months later, here he is with Nix and Altman. And I'm like looking through Bishop Gracita's website, and he's got at the top of his page, he's got this announcement, I was not ordained I was not consecrated a bishop according to the old rite, or according to the new rite. And he explains how, he was made a bishop in 1972, but because the new missal had just come out at that point, they were still using a transitional missal. I mean, that was ringing alarm bells in my head. Like, and the funny thing is, back in June, and sorry if I'm rambling, so feel free to cut off at any point. But back in June 2020, so this is before we knew anything about Altman and Nix, before, but it's like, I had been kind of following Gracita, and to see him on Father's Day, the local news, Mel Gibson was in town at this diner, and they had pictures. And I think I may have retweeted the story. And one of my Twitter followers, who is from Mexico, said, I bet you he wants him to ordain sedevacantists. And I was like, what do you mean? And apparently Mel Gibson had a relationship with a Mexican retired auxiliary bishop who had been ordained a priest been ordained a bishop back in 1961. And this guy passed away in 2016. But Mel Gibson had brought down relatives and things like that to have this Mexican bishop confirm them. Or, in these sedevacantist communities, it's all about finding a valid priest who can ordain. I mean, there's this term, episcope vagante, which is sort of a rogue bishop who doesn't respond, who doesn't listen to any other, authority, and they'll collect like old Catholic bishops who will consecrate them, and like rogue Eastern Orthodox bishops, and other sedevacantist bishops, just to say, look at me, I've been, this many people have put their hands on my head, and I'm definitely a valid bishop. And so it seems to me that Gracita, given how far he had slid rhetorically, that it would make sense that Mel would be interested in someone like that.
In just a moment, I want to play a clip from the video that you referenced there in just a moment ago from Father Altman, a speech that he gave. And of course, he mentioned it in the article as well. But before that, some people, for example, in the chat are curious. They're thinking, why even talk about guys like Altman and Mel Gibson? Why speak about the more traditional Catholics and the problems with them? Why don't, you just focus on the problems with the liberals and just kind of let some of these issues with the trads go? Why address problems with trads, in other words, and not the liberals?
I mean, the thing that I have found, because I mean, I've I consider myself, I'm a lot more conservative than people imagine I am. It's like Valor Humanae Vitae, Mass on Sundays, Eucharistic adoration, confession, not nearly as much as I should, but pretty regularly.
For the record, you maintain everything that the magisterium proposes for
yes,
you,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I guess the question is, what I have found is that when traditionalists dissent, and this is a little bit different than liberals, or it's kind of different in kind. Like if a liberal disagrees on birth control or women's ordination, they will say, I disagree with the church on that. Whereas when it is a conservative, I'll find let's say they disagree with natural family planning. They think natural family planning is against the Catholic Church, even though Paul VI taught it, and every pope since then has taught that it's an authentic way to, for just cause to space children. They will say the real Catholic teaching is yada yada yada. So what it is what they do that I find is a little bit different, and why it needs to be addressed in a slightly different way, is that a lot of traditionalists will claim to speak for the church. And I mean, the Sedevacantist is the extreme version of that. They say that this person can't possibly be Pope. Listen to me, read my blog, read my ebook, and listen to me. And it's, and I mean, we talked about obedience earlier. And I mean, the thing is, and another thing, just to sort of clear up, because I know a lot of, I think we're a lot closer together than people may realize. I mean, we had a conversation recently where it was like, oh, okay. I think it is, I'll admit, I am a fan of Pope Francis, right? But I don't think to be a faithful Orthodox Catholic, you have to be a fan. Like, you can say that was a terrible decision. You could think Traditionis Custodes was a poor prudential decision. You could say he shouldn't have said that thing on the airplane. He shouldn't have done that thing. Why isn't he calling this person out? Like, you can say that. I might disagree with you, or I might agree with you. Sure. But it's I understand that we share the same faith and we disagree on a prudential level of what,
because that's kind of where I am. I'm not a fan of this pontificate at all.
Yeah.
I'm really not a fan, in fact, of most of the post-conciliar pontificates.
Oh yeah. And I mean, the thing is, it's like, I mean, you look at like the conciliar, it's like, why did they get rid of that piece of the mass? Or, why didn't they mandate a little bit more Latin or any Latin in the mass, or
more discipline in the church? Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's like one of those things. It's like the approach, and I can understand, because I think Pope Francis is bringing forth a different approach. To me, I find it challenging, definitely, but in a lot of ways I find it refreshing. And I just, the thing is, I realized kind of early on, like, there's not much I can do about it. So let's
not much. I agree. Yeah. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, the people who have the power to change the issues in the church today, it's the bishops, the Pope especially.
Yeah.
The Pope and the bishops, they have the ability and the authority to change the issues in the church. And frankly, I don't think that they're doing the things that they could do as a whole. I'm not speaking of just every individual here, but I'm just saying as a whole, there's some things that they could do that they're not doing, such as excommunication and exercising better discipline and elevating the right people and not the wrong people. So there's a lot of things that I could criticize, but there's very little that I can actually do about it.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think when it's sort of between friends, or when it's having a conversation, or, when it's sort of like you've been reading a certain theologian and you like his approach, and you kind of see how this other approach does, like that. I respect it. It's totally legitimate. It's totally, and I mean, the funny thing is, we could have a passionate argument. Like, let's say I love, folk mass. I love the folk group. You love chant. I don't. I'm just saying. And like, we have an argument about, which music is better at mass. And let's say I just really love, that like Sing to the Mountain song, and I think it should be the opening hymn of every mass. Like, it's a stupid position, but it's not like a heretical. You know what I'm saying? It's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
But the thing is, you could get really ticked off at me for insisting on that.
Right.
So,
I probably would. But yeah, no,
like that's what I'm saying.
not
Like,
heresy.
like there are real arguments that can happen in the church that are real disagreements that people can really fight it out. I mean, you look at the history of the church, and different saints hated each other's guts. I mean, not hated because they were saints.
Jerome and Augustine definitely didn't get along.
Exactly.
At least on Jerome's end, not on Augustine's end.
So it's but when you see like a fundamental break, like like Father Altman's disobedience, or like denying that the Pope is the Pope, or like saying a council is heretical, when you go that far, it's like, wait a minute, that's you realize that you're breaking with the church there a little bit. You're not, or a lot, This isn't a prudential matter. Like, you've just made a doctrinal claim about the church that's just like, wait a minute, like, stop the presses. And there are levels of authority, there are levels of, but then there's like a clear break. And that's kind of what I fear. That's kind of what I see. Especially because like Altman is so riled up, and does have such a following. I think it's part of our American independent spirit. Like, we really want to see someone go after him, if that makes sense. I mean, that can be cathartic. I mean, I've been there myself. It's like, yeah, get him. But it's like, that's, for one thing, the church has been run by mostly Italians, I think, for the last, ever since they moved back from France. And it's like, the Italians are like, oh, he's crazy, just let him, I don't know. Sorry, Dave.
With Father Altman, there's a lot of things that he has said that are very troubling to me. Not the good stuff about abortion and stuff like that. I don't have problems with it. Obviously, I'm against abortion, and what I'm talking about is other things that just sounds extremely radical traditionalist and seems like dissent. Sounds like it's going the the direction that's eventually going to lead to schism. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things he said that I'm troubled by.
Oh yeah.
That being said, though, I want to address something in your article and give you a chance to respond. There was something in your article where you were speaking about him, where Altman says that Pope Francis is no longer the vicar of Christ. And the way it came across in the article was, it was as if you were saying, well, Altman is now denying that Pope Francis is the vicar of Christ. And you gave me the audio. I went and listened to it. We're about to listen to it here in a moment. In my opinion, when I listened to the audio, I don't think he's saying, I, Father Altman, no longer believe that Pope Francis is the vicar of Christ. I think what he's saying is Pope Francis no longer identifies with that title. And of course, this goes back to the issue with the AP in 2020, which we can get into here in just a second. But my point is to say all of this. And again, in a moment, I'm going to play the clip. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to those who are going to say, Mike, I feel that you were unfair in that article. And I have seen people who say they feel that you were unfair there. They feel that you were suggesting that he was claiming to be a set of contests. And when you go back and listen to the audio, it doesn't sound like he was saying that. Go ahead and offer a response to those. Well, let's do that, and then maybe offer your response. That way we can have some context. That's a better idea. Let me share my screen. Let me know if y'all can't hear the audio. We should be right around the timestamp. 2 hours, 38 minutes, I think.
It should be a little bit before that, like 3 seconds.
That you have earned. And finally, third example, Jorge Bergoglio, Bishop of Rome. No longer the vicar of Christ, he threw out that title. As with Blaise, I hardly know where to start, but all we need to know about him is found in one word, Pachamama. But apart from that, and a few other lowlights of his papacy, like celebrating the 500th anniversary of heretic Luther by putting him on the Vatican stamp, like the sacrilege of putting a beach ball with a Pepsi logo on it on the
All right, so we get the point.
Yeah.
But he was saying no longer the vicar of Christ. In other words, not identifying as such. He dropped that title, I think is what he said.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess it's sort of it's a fair criticism. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of the things that frustrated me, though, is that it was basically a fake news story as far as I could tell. I mean, I don't know the degree to which the Pope reviews every editorial change in the AP,
Right.
but really what it was in 20, I guess, was it between 2018 and 2019 or whatever it was, the previous year it had Vicar of Christ, Supreme Pontiff, servant of the servants of God, Bishop of Rome, all the titles with Vicar of Christ up at the top. And
Right.
then, and I don't know if you have that image yeah. Well, don't. I mean, and then
go ahead though.
And then the following year, and then underneath it said Jorge Mario Bergoglio and gave his biographical information, and he became Pope Francis. The following year, the page was almost identical in content, but the Pope's name was Jorge Mario Bergoglio was at the top, the biographical information, and then it said historical titles of the Pope. So you can kind of see
right
here
on the screen.
So I highlighted in yellow. See on the left is the previous year. It says Vicario di Jesu Cristo, Vicar of Jesus Christ, and then it has the other titles underneath, and then it has his name. The following year, it's swapped. His name is at the top, and then at the bottom there, and I think it says now they've added historical titles rather than just titles, and they list them all there. And Vicar of Christ is still at the top. And I felt that it was kind of an unfair story in the first place, and maybe that's kind of why I put it out the way that I did. Like, why are you bringing up this? Pope Francis, like that. Like I said, we have no idea to what degree Pope Francis oversees the layout of this book. Like, I don't.
Sure.
There's no evidence that it was a command of his. It could have just been some.
Look, let's be honest. That title, to my recollection, wasn't used for probably 8-9 centuries of the first centuries of the church history.
They got
accumulated 800 or 900 years, I think, from what I recall. Now, I'm in favor of retaining that title. Don't get me wrong. But traditionally, the Pope in the first millennium was called the Vicar of Peter, not of Christ. The Vicar of Christ, as far as the title, was way later. And again, I'm in favor of that title.
Oh yeah.
But
and me too. I use it all the time.
Just saying, let's keep things in perspective.
Successor of Peter. But the funny thing is, so Pope Francis actually, if you search the Vatican website, I remember at the time he had used it maybe 3 times, and he's used it. I think he used it in the Dante apostolic letter that he did earlier this year. So he's used it at least 4 times in his public record, public speaking. The other titles that are also in the list, like they haven't been, Bishop of Rome, I'm sure he uses that one. Supreme Pontiff still shows up on all of his documents and encyclicals. To me, it seems like almost like an editorial change. Like, it doesn't seem, and then a lot of people still call him the Vicar of Christ. Like he's never said, don't call me that anymore. Really the only title of the Pope that even matters. Well, Pope isn't a title of the Pope. It's kind of a funny ancestral thing, but the only title that really matters from a theological perspective, I mean, and correct me if you disagree or whatever, but is Bishop of Rome. Like, if you are the Bishop of Rome, you are the successor of Peter and everything else that comes with it. You're the Pope. Which is kind of like, you look at Pope Benedict, Pope Emeritus Benedict. We have emeritus bishops, and I'm in Washington. Mr. McCarrick is no longer our emeritus bishop by title, but Cardinal Wuerl, for example, he is the emeritus Archbishop of Washington. He has no power of governance. You can't appeal to him. He's got, but he's still a cardinal. He's still an archbishop. He still has a spiritual attachment to Washington. And it's sort of the same thing with Pope Benedict now, and that's why he still wears the white. It's because he held that office, and he is now retired, and he's now, there's no question who's in charge. He has absolutely no power of governance. He has renounced it all, but he still does have a spiritual link, but it's really a link of prayer. And that's a whole theology of and there was no such thing as an emeritus bishop until I think 1974 or something like that. Paul VI instituted it, which is why we've never had a Pope emeritus. But it's sort of like, oh, well, let's just do the same thing. And then, people got all confused by the title. But yeah, to go back to the Vicar of Christ thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a question of whether he thinks Francis is a legitimate pope or not. I don't think that the answer is found in that little quip he made. I was sort of quipping back, I guess you could say, because I felt like it was an unfair quip. And maybe I should provide the timestamp. I mean, I can edit the article. Like, that's not integral to the article. I just felt like he made an unfair statement, and I kind of gave it back to him. So yeah, I mean, a fair criticism.
I would definitely like to hear him clarify his position here, but to me, from what it sounds like when I listen to the audio, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he maintains that Pope Francis is still the Pope, because it sounds like he's saying, well, Pope Francis is still the Pope. He just simply dropped the title Vicar of Christ. I'm going to give him that benefit of the doubt, because it's what it sounds like. But I would like for him to, maybe clarify his position, if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair reading. I mean, and mine might have been a little bit rash. I'll give it. It was sort of like, accumulating all this information about Mel Gibson and about Cressida, and it's just sort of like, it's easy
to cross that line, but I do want to be careful not to cross it prematurely, right? To give somebody the benefit of the doubt. But I totally understand why it's easy to do that.
And which is why, I mean, I guess that's the thing. We know that they went, at least these two and nameless others, went to his chapel, went to Mel Gibson's chapel. We don't know that Bishop Cressida or some sedevacantist bishop is there. We don't know that there was like here's the thing. There was a priest of the Diocese of Rockford, Illinois. And I think his name was Michael Oswalt. And he was ordained for Illinois, I think in the year 2008. And I think 2 or 3 years later, he actually declared himself to be a sedevacantist and joined the Congregation of Mary Our Queen, CMRI, which is a sedevacantist organization. And he submitted himself. So he wanted to remain a priest. Well, he said he was no longer a priest. He went, I think, for a year or two of traditionalist seminary, and then was ordained. Like, he wasn't conditionally ordained, he was ordained a sedevacantist priest. I mean, that, and supposedly, as far as we know, that's the one case of it's the one public case, at least, of a priest of the post-Vatican II church who has declared sedevacantism and has been reordained in that way. A lot have gone to like SSPX and that kind of thing, and maybe a lot of people have had covert ordinations, but in his case, I think, and so it's like, we don't know what happened. We don't know if Mel Gibson tried to talk them into it. We know that they have a hostile position towards the Pope, towards the hierarchy, towards the council, towards a lot of people in the church. But we can't really conclude what exactly is going on there unless there's, hard evidence, or unless they tell us, or somebody who was there tells us.
There's a question in the chat here. Did Where Peter Is reach out to any of these parties for comment regarding what was going on before publishing the article? Did you reach out to them by any chance?
An associate of mine actually reached out to the dioceses, sent an email to Bishop Cressida and got a non-response. Father Nix and Father Altman are very difficult, apparently, to get a hold of. I did find a Father Nix email address, actually, and I've been meaning to. I was kind of looking into this story, and then all of a sudden, Mel made that appearance. So, yeah, I mean, beyond that, I mean, this is a continuing story. We're going to hear more about it, and yeah, they definitely should make themselves heard. And I'm going to try.
I'd definitely like to hear their perspective on what exactly their association is. Speaking here specifically about Father Altman and Father Nix, I would definitely like to know what their association is with Mel Gibson, what the purpose is, how they view him, although it sounds like Father Altman views him favorably. But, what exactly is this association? I'd love to hear from them. So hopefully we'll hear more soon.
Yeah, and I mean, the question is, like, what do they think they're doing with him?
Right.
Like, I mean, you would think that unless Mel is opening himself up to recognize and resist, right, rather than sort of vacantism,
right,
obviously the pull is him to them. He's
Yeah.
the one who's flying them in. He's the one who's, flying to Corpus Christi and having, Father's Day brunch. So it's like, well, what do you think he's trying to do with you? What do you think he's trying to, who's courting who's evangelizing who? And, I wonder if the hierarchy is keeping an eye on this at all, if they're even aware of it, if they're, I mean, if I was a bishop and one of my priests was doing this, especially because I know that Archbishop Aquila and Father Dave Nix had kind of a spat a couple of years ago that was fairly public. I mean, this would trouble me, just, and I guess that's one of the things when it comes to dealing with the Catholic Church is there's so much stuff that, obviously there's the seal of confession, but there's also, it's like getting hospital records, there's confidentiality everywhere. And it's like, these conversations could be taking place in the back room, or they could not be happening at all.
Well, it would be nice to hear from them, from the horse's mouth. So hopefully we'll hear from them soon. Richard, thank you for your super chat. He asks, is the Father Altman affair an example of Americanism rearing its ugly head again?
I think it's definitely. It's funny because there are about 33 different definitions of Americanism out there. I think one of the things that stands out, and I think it's Americanism in just a broad, when American spirit gets out of control, or when your patriotism, or your you've imbibed the American culture, which is not a Catholic. It's not really a Catholic culture. It's a Protestant, free-spirited, pioneering. I mean, there are a lot of good qualities to it that can be incorporated into Catholicism, but Americanism is like the bad qualities. And I find that Father Altman's independent streak, not caring what the bishops say, not caring what the Pope says, not listening to his bishop, not listening, condemning. I mean, the USCCB is kind of a, they only have as much authority as the local bishop will let them have. I guess they don't really have authority over anyone, but it's just sort of like dismissing the whole thing out of hand. We have an ecclesiology, and that's one of the things, unlike a, Bible and me kind of church, where you can just sort of like say, okay, well, these are, or, Council of Trent and me, it's really, it says that the Pope and the bishops in communion with him are the authentic interpreters of tradition. And, they settle the question, and, and there's obedience that's required. You can't just start up a Catholic church unless you declare yourself a sedevacantist or something. Being in communion is a big part of that. And he really, and Father Altman just doesn't seem to have much regard for that. Also, the involvement with politics so strongly and tying that into salvation. I mean, I had serious problems with, I didn't vote for either major candidate. It's my first statement publicly about my voting, by the way. I just, it's just, one of them is so bad on the family and, well, on, you know, moral values regarding the family and abortion, and the other was just, you know, in terms of other aspects of Catholic social teaching. I just couldn't, you know, I think when you become too tied to a political candidate, which Father Altman definitely did, I think for a priest especially, that can be corrupting. Even if it is the better of the two candidates, you know, no party is fully Catholic. So I think in a lot of ways there are aspects of Americanism, although sort of like modernism, it's kind of a, you know, it's not the type of heresy that can be summed up in 2 sentences, but there are definitely, I think he might be one in a long line.
Well, let me give you the chance to offer some parting words here, concluding thoughts as we wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. You know, it was good to try to, you know, hash this out a little bit more. Yeah, good. I mean, good conversation. You know, I hope people learn from it. And I mean, thanks for the feedback. I'll append a little bit to the blog post in response to you, because I don't think that was an outright rejection of the title. I think it was just sort of a spiteful thing to say. But yeah, much appreciated. God bless. Good luck.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for coming on.
Keep your ear to the ground regarding the story. I mean, it's just a really interesting, it's a puzzle, you know, it's like, how is this all coming together? But yeah,
I think it's going to continue to unfold as the days go by. So I imagine there's going to be more involved here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But again, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. You're welcome on the show anytime. Just
thanks
shoot
for
me an
having
email
me.
and you can come on. Yeah,
absolutely.
And everybody, thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to, of course, comment, like, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, check us out at patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support what we're doing here. You'll also get access to some extra content. In fact, I just recently put up some new content there just a couple days ago, where I was reviewing some material by the Protestant Gavin Ortlund on icon veneration. So check it out if you're interested. Until next time, God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.